Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, presented by Cattle, Season 4, Episode 38. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm the Food Professor, Sylvain Charbois, live from España.
Our special guests this week from the beautiful west coast of Canada, David Long, Chief Executive Officer, and Cynthia Boulter, Chief Operating Officer of the Greater Vancouver Food Bank. They provide us with an overview of the great work they are doing to address food insecurity and the particular challenges and opportunities for their operation in Vancouver.
I must say, I can't say enough about food banks, to be honest. And so they've reached out a few months ago, had a little chat. I couldn't actually visit the food bank, at least not yet. I wasn't in Vancouver, but some of the stuff they do in Vancouver, it's been great. And as you know, Michael, real estate costs, lodging really affects a lot of people in that area, and so they've been busy, and so very thankful for what they're doing. And we had a great chat for the podcast. I'm looking forward to hear from our audience what they think about some of the stuff they do at the Greater Food Bank in Vancouver.
Yeah, I was enthralled with some of the descriptions, particularly the operations stuff. So I'm in Vancouver. I'm back in Vancouver in the fall, so I'm going to stop by and check it out for myself. I like to go see these things for myself. So it's one of the benefits of this podcast. I get to meet talk to so many interesting people, and next time I'm in town, I'll go and check it out myself.
I think they're just going to love you for it because, food banks tend to be seen as like these warehouses in some obscure place in the city. The fact that someone like you will take the time to go and visit, they absolutely appreciate it. Now, you,
as you said, you are not in Halifax today. You are back in Europe. You're in Spain. What are you doing there?
Well, I don't know. I'm just kidding.
Searching for coffee, I hear. Searching for
I just felt like running. Yeah, I just felt like running like Forrest Gump. I just ran and ran.
Kept running.
And I'm at the water now, the Mediterranean Sea, so I have to turn around, I guess. But I'm here. I was invited by the International Food and Agribusiness Management Association to keynote this year's event. It happens every June, and they alternate continents. So this year is Europe's turn, and they decide to actually ask Spain to host for the first time in 34 years. And so it's a great event. The reason why I love IFAMA is because the first 2 days are academics presenting papers. So you got the science there going, and then the last 2 days very focused on industry. So you have CEOs and so very rarely they have an academic keynoting during the forum with businesses. So when I was asked to deliver a keynote, I was very pleased, and I actually I have an idea why they invited me to speak, because I'm a very positive person. I actually see climate change as an opportunity. It's not. I don't adopt the doom and gloom message like some of my colleagues would do on stage, unfortunately. But I do see. We've done some great things, right? And just to give you an idea, a lot of people are saying, well, we need 4.6 billion acres of land to produce the food we need. And that's going to grow over time. But what people aren't saying is that if we were still using technologies of the 1980s, we would require an extra billion hectares to basically make the food we need today. So there is this evolution, and the industry is innovating and growing, and with little fanfare. Nobody really celebrates any of this. And so
we do. We've had lots of innovators, and that's part of the other thing I love about this. Those innovators, fantastic.
So when I spoke, and there was about 400 people in the room, and when I spoke, I said, "This is like our therapy session. We need therapy, and that therapy needs to become more collective with citizens and consumers out there who thinks often that agriculture is a problem, not a solution for the environment."
And now you also, just the last thing on that, you posted a super interesting pic on X from the plane. And And you were saying those were greenhouses. It looked like a field. I thought they were like tennis courts, or I don't know what they were. But there's just dozens and dozens of greenhouses. Am I seeing that correctly?
Well, I was forewarned. I was told, "Oh, when you're going to land, you're going to see something really unique." And I said, "Yeah, whatever." And when I started to see from afar, because we were, basically dropping in altitude, I started to see these tents, these white
roofs or whatever,
roofs, and as I got closer, I realized they were greenhouses. And in fact, when you actually take a taxi from the airport to the hotel, you could see they're all greenhouses. But this time, what's really interesting is this time of year, like June, they're all empty. They're not growing anything because it's a bit too hot. So what they do is that they actually put plastic above the soil to decontaminate the soil organically. So the heat of the greenhouse basically burns or eliminates all of the bad stuff you want to be eliminated. And so 2 months later, they have basically brand new soil ready to work with for the next crop. It's just,
wow.
So they have, they do grow a lot. They export for about $5 billion worth of produce. So Almeria, is the largest region in the world when it comes to greenhouse production. Okay. I believe there's only one country that surpasses Spain, and I believe that's the United States. But Spain is a big, big player when it comes to greenhouse production, and I think there's some lessons to be learned here, because over thousands of farmers are family farms. It's not one gigantic company owning all that. It's several farms working together in coordination with a co-op, of course, to support them in agrology. Any equipment they need to operate these, they share. And so it's really
as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, certification processes, which can be costly, they share also. So the state of Almeria makes sure that this industry, which is growing still by 10 to 15% a year, 15 a year, and they make sure that the industry supports many families. And so this region of Spain was one of the poorest of the country 30 years ago. Now it's one of the richest.
Wow, what a transformation!
But tourists don't come here, right? It's not a touristy region, right?
Yeah.
So unlike Barcelona and elites like you,
I know. Now, speaking of Barcelona, one of the things that the people, and yes, I do talk to the people when I'm there. They were talking about
the little people.
The drought conditions. For years, they weren't getting much water, and of course, the heat in the summer just goes to the 40s, and so they're suffering a bit from climate impacts. Is that the case in Almeria, and are they dealing with it with the greenhouses? How are they finding water for all this, for example?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and but they're not too worried about it, to be honest, because environment control agriculture is exactly that. You don't have to worry about the environment. So you can control everything. You can measure everything, from quality to making sure that you have the proper resources to support everyone. It's really nice. So it doesn't matter what the weather is. But I must say this time of year, it's pretty hot because it's the most southern part. We basically can see Morocco from here.
Wow. And speaking of Morocco, later on this summer, we met the Canadian ambassador from Morocco, and they were they were the most what do we call it? The celebrated nation, the most favored nation at Cial. So I had a great chat with her. So look for that coming up soon. We'll talk about that wonderful country and their culinary background. So that's coming up real soon in our summer. Let's get to the news. Lots to cover, actually. So let's get going. Let's start with the Too Good To Go initiative. Look, smell, taste. Now, you and I have been talking about for literally years, 4 seasons, the expiry dates and the best before dates don't mean deadly after. So Too Good To Go, which is the food kind of food rescue. It's an operation that I've got to know the people well as well. They hook up with grocers and restaurants and other places, and you can download their app and go find food that's good food that's left over. What have they done here? Are they launching their own criteria? Talk about what you're seeing and what their initiative is.
Yeah, so basically they approached me many months ago because they knew that we've looked at best before dates, and Canadians basically are addicted to them. I don't think we're going to see best before dates disappear for two reasons. One, when you go to a grocery store, you don't just buy food, you buy time. So you'll buy, the one product with the farthest best before date. It gives you some wiggle room when it comes to inventory management at home. But the other issue, of course, are expiring food. A lot of people are looking for expiring food to save money. And so if you don't have best before dates, how does that work? And so, but at the same time, we need to tell people best before dates aren't based on science. It's just a date. And so that's why I thought that the campaign that was launched by Too Good To Go was just the perfect balance, and it costs a little money for manufacturers. You just add a little label above the best before date telling people to look, smell, and taste, and that's it. It's a very simple campaign, but it gets people to talk about best before dates and the validity of these dates, really.
Yeah. Well, very interesting. Good for them. Yeah. Good organization and global organization, by the way.
Do you eat products that are past their best before dates once in a while?
Yeah. In fact, I had some this morning. It was a yogurt that was like, I don't know, a couple of days past, but it smelled. I did the look, smell, taste. No fungus among us, as we would say.
And it wasn't open?
It was open. No, it was open.
Oh, it was open. Wow.
It was not open. Sorry, it was not open. I opened it up, looked fine, smelled fine. Take a little taste.
This campaign really looks at non-open, non-compromised packages, of course. I've always believed that the most important risk manager in the entire food supply chain is the consumer. So it really is up to the consumer to decide what to do if you're sick, if you have kids, if you're pregnant. Be careful. You will perceive and manage risk differently. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about this capital gains tax that was part of the budget that came out. It's been it's an interesting thing. We've mentioned it before. We're not a political podcast, so we won't talk about the trap that the Liberals are trying to lay for Poilievre and getting him to respond.
Yeah,
by the way, he did finally respond. He kind of wiggled out of it and said, "I'll take a look at it," but he did not come out against it because he does not, and this is the nature of the trap, does not want to be seen as being on the side of big business. Most Canadians are not impacted by this, but doctors, farmers. Now, I've been trying to understand this issue. I listened to some great podcasts from David Hurley. He had a panel on discussing it, and they make the point that, listen, there's so many inclusions. It's so complicated from a tax perspective that, a straightforward analysis is somewhat hard to understand there's lots of exemptions. There's lots of stuff that kind of round out the numbers. But what's your
everyone's case is different, really.
Well, yes, but the inclusion rate is a complex.
Your tax situation is different than mine for a variety of reasons. So, but here's the argument that I don't like coming from the government is that it affects a very few number of Canadians, which is not true because you can't say that. A lot of people, especially in the agri-food sector where there are tons of family businesses, succession planning is a big deal.
Yeah, but they get carve-outs up to $1 million. Like they've got protected carve-outs in their capital gains.
Do you know how much these farms are worth today? $1 million is not much. I mean, these companies are asset-rich, cash poor. You know this, right?
Yes.
And so you rely a lot on assets to basically build a family fortune. And so eventually you'll get dinged. Whether it's you or the next generation, you'll get dinged. So whether it's you or your kids, that's one thing.
Okay.
And the other issue, of course, not a
lot of sympathy for that in the general population, by the way. That rich people are going to pay more taxes.
Because most people aren't in business. They can't appreciate that. That's the thing. And of course, and you have to think about Canadians with a cottage right next to water. which is they've never sold, they've never bought it because they inherited it or something. If they want to sell it because they need the cash, they'll get dinged. They'll get dinged because it's going to be over $250,000. Because I think a lot more than 0.13% of Canadians will be impacted by this eventually. That's one thing that really bothers me. The other thing that bothers me, coming from the folks that actually do support this, the narrative seems to suggest that capital gains apply on speculation, which is totally, well, it's partly true, but you get to pay capital gains based on productivity as well. Productive decisions, okay, or increase in efficiencies in the economy will generate capital gains. The fact that you're just a free rider of the economy based on inflation is totally misleading in my view. Someone who pays a capital gains tax did not just ride the economic wave over time. Okay, when you have assets, you have to invest in them. You have to take care of them. You have to take on risks. When you buy something in the economy, you take on a risk. And so right now we're penalizing people who are successful, but they've taken on risks. And this is something that is underappreciated, I think.
And you think, again, particularly for this podcast, because we're about the food industry, you think the impact on farmers and the agri-food sector could be negative if this goes through, and it's been kind of not necessarily going through because it was all just a bit of theater anyway, and you're concerned that would increase in the long run, short run costs and decrease
even in
innovation.
The restaurant business, I mean, in the restaurant business, if you operate a franchise, for example, I mean, all franchises are a bit different, but if you have accumulated assets and that is your pension plan, that's a bit of a problem. That's a huge problem. And so that's why, and of course, right now it's awkward in Canada because if you do have money and if you are a successful business person, you can't voice your opinion because people will point fingers at you and say, how dare you, do your part, you're richer than anyone else. And that's the philosophy that really scares me because as soon as we were talking about this yesterday here in Spain, with Americans and people from all over the world, as soon as a government starts basically sending clear message about profiting or business success, you slowly build a risk-averse economy. People won't invest because they'll get penalized if they are successful. I mean, I was actually talking to some economists here from Africa. And in Africa, the deal is about hope. It's about building an economy. I mean, that continent is due to do
it's going to be the youngest. Yeah. And if they can harness it, they're going to be.
And some of the policies right now that you see in different places in the country, in the continent of Africa, is that you're seeing governments basically pushing down entrepreneurship and business investments. And that's the last thing you want to do. And that's exactly what Ottawa is doing with this. It doesn't matter let's say that 0.13 is right. Let's say that it's minimal, okay? Still, the signal you're sending to the business community around the world is that Canada is not open for business because if you come here to do business, you'll get dinged.
Let's talk about Stats Canada. So, kind of like the Catholic Church, they think in centuries. I think they finally agreed to update the CPI basket to put more food weighting in inflation calculation. What do you make? What do you make of this?
Well, so first of all, I thought, okay, why now? And I guess every 5 years they kind of review the percentage. It's now up to 16.87, I think. I don't remember. I don't have it in front of me, but it went up by 0.6%.
16 points. It's 16.72. Up from 16.13. I guess that matters.
But if you look at the increase, and I wasn't surprised to see that the vast majority of the increase is due to food service, restaurants. Interesting. Yeah, and so I wasn't surprised by that because people are going out a little bit more. not to think about it, but people are consuming a lot of food outside the home. And that's the shift basically that I saw from StatCan overall. I mean, it's 16.7% now. That's probably due to something else that has dropped. Is it clothing? Is it something else?
Been deceleration in a lot of categories just because of
so there's more space for food, I guess. So I think that's the rationale. But I always look at the retail service ratio, and service clearly was a big factor here.
Interesting. In other kind of, I don't know, political news or government news, ruling came down from the feds around salmon farming in BC. So I caught, we've had a couple of, we had a couple of great episodes actually talking about salmon farming in the West Coast and some folks from the Indigenous community who were seeming like they had built a community of an economy that was just kind of shut down. Now, the government is saying there's going to be a 5-year phase-out period, but discuss the impact on the industry itself and consumers from your perspective.
First of all, it's a huge disappointment. We actually conducted a couple of studies on this. If you were to shut down BC salmon farms, you are likely going to have to import more salmon. It's so difficult to actually bring that production on land in 5 years. That's what they're expecting to do. And keep in mind, I mean, producing salmon on land is way more expensive. And just to give you an example, if you go to a grocery store, typically, so there is one brand in Canada called Sustainable Blue. Their salmon is actually produced on land, and it's about $18 a kilo.
And so, just for the listeners to be clear, when we say on land, it means it's not on it's not an open pen in the ocean. That's right.
And
that seems to be the concern from Fisheries Canada, which is sea lice and other things kind of spread to the wild population. Have I got that right?
That's right, exactly. And so the argument is that open pens actually will impact the environment and the population of wild salmon, which is a really touchy subject. But
we had one of your colleagues on a prior episode. What was her name?
Stephanie Colombo.
Stephanie Colombo, and she's the global expert in this, and she was less concerned about that issue. No,
she wasn't very concerned. And frankly, on our study shows, she was involved with our study. Some Aboriginal leaders were involved in our study as well, and they actually operate some farms themselves. So this is coming from, I think, from a place where politics will listen to activism, very much so, and activists, they've been incredibly successful. And frankly, it reminds me a little bit about the Loblaw situation. I mean, a lot of people are absolutely convinced that the reason why food prices are higher is because of one company, because of one
regardless
person.
Of all evidence or any evidence that counters that narrative.
So I would say that really what's going on in BC is that I think a lot of people have been convinced that this is a problem and we need to get rid of it as soon as possible. And so the DFO is basically listening to that. But I think it's the wrong decision because it will push salmon prices higher retail. It will increase the carbon footprint of salmon purchases at retail also in Canada because you'll have to import some somewhere else. There's no way we're going to transfer 70,000 kilos of production from open pens to on land without impacting prices. I don't think that's going to happen. So the sustainable blue salmon, which is really the Cadillac of salmon because it's all on land.
Farm salmon, yeah.
So what the DFO is saying is that in 5 years from now, we want all of the salmon to become sustainable blue salmon. That's $18 retail, okay? If you walk into a grocery store, if you actually buy open pen salmon, it's not written as well. I know it because I know how to look for them. It will retail at about $11 a kilo.
Wow.
So 11 versus 18.
Big difference.
And we actually did a taste test at home. So I bought both species. I bought both, brought it home, did a taste test with my kids, my wife. All of them actually picked the cook salmon, which was $11 a kilo.
And from just the last point, is there any nutritional differences? I know some people just don't want to eat farmed salmon.
Stephanie actually did look at this issue a few years ago, and there is no difference. People think that, so she looked at open pen.
Isn't there some colorant added to make it look like more salmon?
She looked at open pen versus on land and wild versus farmed, and there are no nutritional differences.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, let's take a break from the news. First of all, let's hear from our presenting sponsor, Cattle, who has got some very interesting research. I think we said we'd talk about it this episode. We're actually going to talk about it next episode, about cashiers and Canadians' perspectives around associates sitting down at the cash. And we got the research back.
Actually, I walked into a grocery store here last night when I got in town. And so there were 4 cashiers.
Yeah,
it was Carrefour. There were 4 cashiers. 2 of them were sitting, and 2 of them were standing up.
Interesting. So we're going to talk about that next week. But for now, let's hear from Cattle, and then let's get to our great interview from the Greater Vancouver Food Bank from Cynthia and David. Ever feel like the world of ratings and reviews needed a superhero? Well, enter Cattle, the caped crusader with Canada's largest, most diverse, and daily active consumer panels. That's right, Cattle is not your average podcast sponsor. They're like that cool friend who always knows the hottest trends. I mean, they are the voice of the consumer, after all. So why choose Cattle? Because Cattle excels in consumer insights from your consumer world, also blazing trails in the realm of ratings and reviews, pioneering the future landscape of user-generated content. Beyond valuable syndicated receipt data, they stand as unparalleled collector of reviews at scale, irrespective of category or price point. A testament to their impact, partnerships with giants like Walmart, Canadian Tire, and more. Visit AskCattle.com now for an exclusive The Food Professor podcast listener discount on your first review or research campaign today. That's AskCattle.com.
This afternoon, we actually have some great guests joining us. I've always believed that food banks are a miracle of the human spirit, and we have 2 guests representing the Greater Vancouver Food Bank, which I've had the pleasure to talk to. I think it was a few months ago. We have both David and Cynthia from the Food Bank in Vancouver joining us this afternoon. How are you?
We're great. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you.
Good stuff. So tell us more about the food bank itself in Vancouver. I visited many food banks across the country. It's always different. The focus is often very different. The market is different. So tell us more about the Vancouver Food Bank.
Well, we're one of the big 6 food banks across the country, as I'm sure you are aware. We're the biggest food bank in British Columbia. We've been around for 40 years. I think we're a little bit different from other food banks. I love to tell people, when they ask you, what do you do? And I say, I work at the Greater Vancouver Food Bank. You can kind of see in their eyes that they think you work in some dingy church basement handing out boxes of craft dinner. And when I kind of tell them the size and scope I think the best way to describe it is that we look like Costco, and we have a fleet of trucks on the road. And last year, some 9 million pounds of food left our warehouse.
Wow. Unbelievable. Wow. Was that a record last year?
Yeah, I think it was. Unfortunately, we've been a record in the amount of food that's going out, a record in the amount of food that's coming in donated, which is lucky. And unfortunately, we've seen an increase, obviously, in clients, as every other food bank across the country has. In fact, around the world from other food banks that I talk to.
Oh, really? So tell us more about the state of food insecurity in Vancouver in particular. So things are really busy, unfortunately, where you are. So what's going on in the Greater Vancouver area?
Well, I think it's, in Vancouver and in Toronto, it's the cost of housing. Everything is more expensive, but especially the price of housing, the cost of housing, the rental market, as we all know. And unfortunately, food is sort of the last thing where people can actually squeeze a few dollars, and that's where they try and save some money. Everything else is pretty much a fixed cost, whether it's some shelter, car insurance, a vehicle to get around, all sorts of different things. But it's just that it's that expensive big city problem that we all seem to be facing across the country, especially Toronto, as I say, and in Vancouver.
Now, Food Banks Canada have actually has mentioned many times in the last 12 months about the working poor. Is this something you see in Vancouver, and do you think it's actually worse where you are?
Absolutely. We're seeing more and more people that are working. Single parents that are trying to hold down a full-time job, but they don't have enough money to make ends meet once they've paid for various things and paid their bills, and they just need a little bit more assistance. Wages don't seem to have kept up with inflation or where the economy has gone in the last number of years, and we're seeing more and more people that actually are working. And unfortunately, we're seeing more and more senior citizens that have retired, their retirement income just isn't keeping up.
Wow. I'll ask one more question to you, David, and I'll throw it back to Michael. You do talk to other food bank operators around the country, I'm sure. From an operational perspective, do you see some differences in Vancouver compared to, say, Calgary, Toronto, Montreal?
Yeah, I think all food banks are slightly different, as you could have mentioned previously. I mean, we all do more or less do the same work, but maybe in a slightly different style. In Vancouver, we're very fortunate. We do a lot of work with our farming community. And so, in the last 5 years, we've gone from giving out 20% fresh to probably somewhere nearly 70% of what we give out is fresh, which is super important to us. And so we do a lot of work with our farmers. We try and make sure that the quality of the food that we're giving out is as good as can possibly be. And we took the rather dramatic step a couple of years ago of no longer doing public food drives, but we went virtual. So there's a virtual food drive on our website because we found that traditionally, as with many food banks, people go they want to do a food drive for the local food bank. They go and clean out the kitchen cupboard, and it's not necessarily sort of the best quality of the food that we want to actually give out to people. So the virtual food drive for us has really been exceptional. And it's also cut down on our waste and the number of volunteers that we would need to sort through some of the food that comes from people.
So interesting, Cynthia. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about the operations. You're head of the operations. David mentioned tonnage figure. He mentioned trucks on the road. Could you give us an overview of the key programs and services that the food bank offers to its community?
Mm-hmm. Well, David mentioned the 9 million pounds last year. So a little over half of that goes to direct distribution to individuals, and a little under half goes to our community agencies. When David and I started 6 years ago, we were serving about 6,000, 7,000 people a month, and we were supporting about 74 agencies. And we are up to about 15,000 people a month. And we just brought on another 19 agencies. So we're at 150 agencies that we support each month across the 4 municipalities that we support. And they're critical in really extending the reach of the food bank. Give
the listeners an example of a couple of those agencies. So as I understand it, as you're describing it, there's kind of David said, we're like a Costco. So there's kind of a come and shop part, but then there's this distributed model with these agencies. Who might they be? Give us a couple examples.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have women's shelters. We have transition homes. We have community centers. We have neighborhood houses. We have housing programs. And they take our food that they pick up each week, and they might turn that into a small community food bank, a hamper program, a meal program, a seniors program, food for an entire house, for women who are fleeing violent situations in their previous home and getting reset up in life. So the food really connects so many more people in these communities that we support. And so that's a huge part of what we do. On the individual side, for people who come to pick up food, as David mentioned, very big focus on fresh. We menu plan, so we make sure that the food people pick up each week easily transitions into meals. We cover all of the food groups, and we have extras on the menu every week that are fresh from our farmer and wholesaler relationships. And then once a month, we offer nutritional programs per age group, and we've built up a baby program, a preschooler program for kids from 2 to 5, a grade schooler program for kids from 6 to 12, and then a seniors program for 65 and over. And we designed all of those programs with a dietitian. So in addition to your weekly pickup of food, if you have a baby in your household, you're going to be getting either the first year program or the second year program, with everything from formula and baby cereal and diapers to a lot of first foods, some fruits and vegetables and yogurts and whole grain cereals, to get these kids the proper nutrition early. We are really focused on nutrition, and we're doing what we can to get some healthy eating habits started early in these homes, in these food insecure homes. So that's in letting go of food drives, which was such a great move for us. A lot of the volunteers now can put together these nutritional programs, and you are packing in eggs and milk and cheese and other proteins and fruits and vegetables into these kids and seniors programs. And it is such a fabulous experience for the volunteers.
A couple of quick follow-up questions. So in the distributed network part, I'm interested how you track that. I don't know if you would call it accountability, but how do you measure the effectiveness when you've got so many partners that are reaching out into the community? Do you get, like, what's the trade craft? Do you gather everybody together and put a plan together, or they submit asks and they get authorized? I'm just a little kind of curious about how you operationalize, so to speak, such a vast network.
Yeah, it's a great program. I mean, in terms of the application, we open up twice a year for applications for new agencies, and they need to be a registered charity themselves. That's important for us to retain our charitable status. We understand who they are through that application. We do site visits to look at what their food safe practices are, right. And if they sort of meet our standards or if they need any support. And then throughout the year, once or twice, we will survey them in terms of how the food is being used, either the number of people they are serving or the number of visits they are seeing to their organization. And we also do annual site visits. We profile them so that we really understand, even as a whole organization, when we share that information, who they help, and the kinds of meals they are providing. And then we also highlight them for our donors in newsletters and on social media, because we just think that's just as important as the distribution to the individual side in terms of what these small organizations do and who they help day in and day out. So there's quite a bit of transparency in terms of reporting. We've also been able to share some of the federal money we've received in grants since the pandemic with agencies. And we started at $1,000 and we moved that up to $5,000 or $6,000. And that amount of money can transform a kitchen.
I was going to say that's a pretty transformational amount of money, right? For a small,
it is
women's shelter or whatever. Sure.
Exactly. And they will report back to us. Just, we keep it simple because we know they are very often short-staffed, but what did you use the funds? What was the plan for the funds? What did you use them for? And what's the impact been? And that could be, as we say, transforming the kitchen so they can produce more food. It might be hiring somebody part-time to run a meal program. It might be increasing the refrigeration so that they can safely store more fresh food. But I love those stories because the food every week that we give them is obviously super important. But the sustainability of the grants and what they can do for their organizations is super exciting.
David, you mentioned, and I would imagine you've got both grocery partners, brand partners, and a network of restaurants and other partners. Could you share some of those partners and the collaborations that are probably crucial to the food bank's operation?
Absolutely. We have just a myriad of partners that we work with. Loblaws is a huge supporter of the Vancouver Food Bank. We have a great relationship with them. We get some amazing quality food out of them. We have Windset Farms here in BC. It's a huge greenhouse grower, just an incredible partner, and a lot of donations of amazing fresh tomatoes, cucumbers, bell peppers, etc. And then we have a lot of farming collaboration where we work closely with a lot of our farmers directly. And we're thrilled with the farmer tax credit here in British Columbia. It's 25%. I think it's the same in Ontario. I think in Quebec, it's actually a 50% tax credit for farmers that donate produce to food banks. So, Sylvain, I'd love you to have a conversation with somebody if you could, and maybe make BC and Ontario 50% like Quebec is for the tax credit. Because honestly, when you talk to farmers about it, it just makes a lot of sense. The average farmer leaves
absolutely.
They leave about 10% of the crop in the field, as you probably know or are aware of. So, some of our farmers, you got 600 acres. And they filled the quota for whoever they're selling to, and they might have 60 acres of vegetables or whatever it is they're growing left. And so we offer incentives to the farmers to pay the salary or the wages to pick that excess crop and then give them a tax credit as well. But to see an increase in that tax credit, I think would be great for BC. I know. And hopefully extend it past the 2027. I think it's going to get cut off in 2027, but for us, it's been huge. In fact, I just had to build a new massive fridge just to cope with some of the volume of the fresh food we're getting in from that.
David, you run an interesting organization, one that in one universe we all wish didn't need to exist, but at the same time
is true.
Right? I mean, but at the same time, it is, I think food banks are seen as just a key part of any local community now, but just beyond providing food, but providing a sense of place and a sense of being and a sense of citizenship. Is that how you see it as well?
Yeah, I think food banks are changing, and I think people ask me what's the biggest hurdle or the biggest obstacle you face, and I think it's the perception from the public that through no fault of their own that we've kind of changed and we're no longer we're a more modern food bank. We're really focused on fresh food, but we're starting to focus more on other services to help individuals. We've just got a new warehouse here in Vancouver. Apart from our main warehouse, we have another smaller warehouse where we're going to start these wraparound services in the next few months, where we're going to offer people the opportunity to sit and talk to other organizations that maybe help them get back in the workforce. For example, Work BC or WCG or Immigration Social Services. We've actually set aside some office space and we can organize appointments for our regular clients that we get to know that are coming to get food anyway, that, they're in the same location. They may as well have these conversations with these other agencies to try and help them get back in the workforce, to get them, get the help they need to get back into the workforce to get another job.
I guess we could shift gears here and talk about volunteers. Volunteers are so critical, Cynthia, for food banks. And what's your approach with volunteers? How do you recruit them? How do you take care of them? How do you get people more involved, I guess?
It is such a crucial thing. I mean, we couldn't live a day without our volunteers. And that's really evolved in the time that we have been here. We have 2 staff who oversee our entire volunteer operation, and we have a couple thousand active volunteers at any given time. We really focus on stewardship. So right from when they come in, we use a volunteer management software. You can sign up online to be a volunteer. We open up applications a couple times a year because we are fortunate enough to have a lot of interest, and we want to make sure the number of volunteer shifts matches the number of volunteers and that people are actually able to be active with us. We give a great in-person orientation of all the different types of volunteering that you can do. We teach people how to use the software, and we encourage people to try different things. We celebrate volunteer anniversaries, whether that's, 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, and so on. We give out some merchandise. So once you've done a few shifts with us, you will receive a Greater Vancouver Food Bank t-shirt. We have a volunteer newsletter that updates volunteers on what is happening with the food bank and some other volunteer stories. We profile volunteers on social media, and we just did our first volunteer celebration lunch a few months ago. We offered a lunch for 50 people. It sold out. I mean, it was free, but we filled the seats in 24 hours, and we had staff serving them. And it was a great event. These are super dedicated people. We also have a lot of corporate groups now that we didn't used to have, and they are loving the volunteering and connecting with community. And that gives us an opportunity to connect with their employer and, fill them in on things like that virtual food drive, and what a great opportunity that is to support. You can run an online fundraiser in your company. You can have competitive department experiences, and then employers can match what their employees have raised if they so choose, which is great for engagement. So we have a lot of fun with our volunteers, and just really try to get to know them and keep that relationship tight, and keep communication, I think, is really important. Trying to have everybody understand how important it is that they are here. We have very few sort of late cancellations, that kind of thing. We work hard on that, and they're a very committed group.
David, last kind of couple of questions for you. You've already mentioned one government type initiative or support around the tax credit. Is there any others you'd like to see? Sylvan and I have often talked about something akin to a food stamp type program that would be run, whether it's farmers markets or through the food banks or something. Is there anything, if you had an ask to make at the provincial or federal level, in addition to what you talked about earlier, what would that be?
My God, you're opening up a can of worms for me now. This is going to be fun. I think first and foremost, I'd love to see the Premier of the province come and actually visit the largest food bank in BC, or the Minister of Agriculture to come and take a look and have discussions about the farmer tax credit and just the impact that it has. It seems pretty difficult to get their attention. I know they're busy people, but I think it would be really important for them to come and see what we're actually trying to do and achieve here. We just started... we had a surplus of apples from the Okanagan from a packing house recently, about 100,000 pounds of apples. And when you take 50 tons of apples, it's pretty hard to hand them all out to your clients. So we actually freeze-dried about 15,000 pounds of apples, and we juiced another 20,000 pounds of apples. So we put the apple juice through a hyperbaric chamber, so it's pressurized, so it's good for 180 days. There's no additives in it. The freeze-dried apples keep 97% of their nutrition. They've got a shelf life of 20 years. So there's lots of really entrepreneurial things being done that I think I would love to talk to government about how we've changed. And I would love to have a conversation about infrastructure that's needed around the province of BC, in fact, around Canada. I have all of this amazing surplus food, but I got nowhere to move it to. So if I had another large warehouse or more refrigeration in depots around the province or around the country, what a great idea to have these depots where we could actually get it to people that really need it. Because the thing that breaks my heart is that here in Vancouver we're blessed, we're very fortunate with the amount of fresh product we have, but you don't have to go very far. A 3 or 4 hour drive away into the interior, and then all of a sudden it's a different story. So I think conversations about entrepreneurial solutions. Not so much of the demands of government to give more money, but there's solutions out there, and there's people doing a lot of amazing work. Sylvan, you must see this on a daily basis, the creativity that's out there.
Oh, absolutely. I was just visiting the Regina Food Bank about a month ago, and I don't know if you saw the free quote unquote grocery store concept. It was great. Yep. It was awesome. Yep.
And different areas of the country. I mean, to have a conversation at sort of at the federal level about, you're talking about John there in Regina, and he has a lot of the grains and pulses, and I have a lot of the fresh product on the West Coast. And how do we move this across the country so we can all partake of what's the excess that there is in this amazing country that we live in?
Well, I guess my last question, I'll hand the mic back to Sylvain to wrap us up, is, for the listeners listening, I mean, we have brands, we have grocers, and we have citizens. What might you ask of them?
Keep supporting your local food banks and get involved, I think is the message for me. And if you can't afford to help support financially, then maybe donate your time. As Cynthia was mentioning, our volunteers have a great experience when they come here. When you're handing a family, a hardworking family that just can't make ends meet for whatever reason, when you're giving them good quality food, it's just such a great experience and a great feeling. So I would say try and get involved with your food bank. And from a political level, go and talk to your food bank and find out the innovation that's happening right across the country, especially as a politician. I think it's vital that they do that. Mm.
Well, listen, it was such a pleasure to have you both on our show today. Thank you so much for doing what you're doing. We need it. I'm one Canadian who believes that food banks have an economic purpose. Sometimes people think, well, we need to get rid of food banks because food banks represent a failing food system. I don't agree with that vision. I actually do think that there are always going to be market failures and people being left behind, and food banks are incredibly efficient in terms of helping people very, very quickly. And we saw that during the pandemic. It was pretty clear. And so, yes. So thank you again for all the work you're doing, both David and Cynthia. And thank you for joining us on the Food Professor podcast.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sylvain. Please come visit us in Vancouver.
Absolutely.
All right, let's continue on the little political side. So in the death of irony category, the Honorable John Manley, former Deputy Prime Minister, Finance Minister, has found some sort of free...
You want to talk about that one?
He seems to have found some sort of free market religion and now is calling for the end of supply management in dairy, and thinks the idea... For some reason, he also thinks the idea of a code of conduct for grocers may actually push prices up. I don't know where I'd like him to show his work on that. What do you make of that? What do you make of this?
But no, seriously, I think the column, I disagree for two reasons. One, and you'll be shocked by this. First of all, you can't get rid of supply management. You just can't. There's too much baggage. There's $30 billion worth of quotas out there. Family farms depend on them. FCC is actually heavily invested in dairy, and FCC belongs to all of us. So getting rid of quotas is really going to be incredibly tough. And they have a lot of political clout, which brings me to my next point. John Manley is no longer an elected official. He's the not only former MP, Liberal MP, but he's the former vice Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister. Where was he when
right.
I mean, supply management has been an issue for a long time, so he could have said something, but he didn't because, well, he cared about votes at the time, and now he doesn't have to, which makes him a little, I don't know, what's the word?
Begins with an H? Does it begin with an H, perhaps?
Probably, yeah. Healthy? I would say so. But
hopeful?
The argument about price, I mean, this is the other issue, and I am going to defend dairy farmers on this because I think they're right. Arguing that supply management needs to change is absolutely fine. I think there are some major problems with the regime.
Change.
Yeah, change, exactly. And you need to focus more on competitiveness, on exports. You got to get rid of people who don't want to compete, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it can go on and on and on and on. We've talked about
all
this.
the things we've talked about over the past 4 seasons.
But to argue that by eliminating supply management, you'll make supply managed commodities cheaper, there's no certainty. There's zero certainty there. In fact, with dairy in particular, you could actually see the opposite. So it's to be careful what you wish for. I think we need to do something with supply management, but for the right reasons. And this is just not one of them.
All right, last couple of things. Would you like AI with that? Apparently not. McDonald's pauses a pretty high-profile AI drive-through test pilot. And I guess, now this has been run, I've been a big fan of this. Somebody called Del Taco in Southern U.S. has been running this seemingly successfully, but apparently the McDonald's pilot started generating kind of, wrong orders, and that people just pump that up in social media because that's kind of the reality we all live in. And basically, at the end of the day, the social media impact, reputation cost, started to go and outweigh the benefits of the AI pilot. So way to go, social media, shutting down innovation of all types. I think it's when, not if.
The issue were wrong orders? Is that what the issue was?
Well, yes, but if I scratch below the surface, knowing what I know, I will guarantee people were trying to make error orders, forcing, the AI, trying to trick it and goof on it so they could capture it for social media and build up their social cred or whatever that is. So that's what I think.
Did they do a Wayne World's moment?
Whatever.
Do you remember that scene?
Yeah. Well, whatever it was, right. Let's just say it was not goof-proof. So the goofs win on this one.
So you need a Wayne's World test in order to make sure that your AI program works. Is that what you're saying?
I think the goofs won on this round, but the fight's not over.
Wayne's World, party on.
I almost want to end it there, but I got one last thing. Wall Street Journal reports several retailers in the U.S. are talking about resizing their women's apparel line as the GLP-1 impact starts to take hold.
What?
So I just want to call that out because we've been talking about this very early on, and now we're not interested in the apparel business, but we are certainly interested in the food consumption business. So we start to see tangible.
Did you see Laura Brohout's column yesterday on Ozempic?
I didn't.
Yeah, and our good friend Joanne MacArthur was actually quoted in saying that more and more restaurants are going to be providing an Ozempic menu to some people so they can feel that they're included. An Ozempic menu for people using GLP-1s. Can you imagine?
I can imagine a lot with this technology.
This is really interesting.
Well, it's not the last time we're going to talk about it, but every time I see some kind of meaningful, that's a good call out as well. Some kind of meaningful innovation or impact, we'll call that out. But anyway, action-packed episode. When are you heading back? Are you heading back on the weekend? Are you spending any extra time?
Oh yeah, no, I'm back for the weekend for sure. You know me, right? I only spend a couple of days in Europe and then back. So
don't even get jet lagged. Don't even have time to get jet lagged.
No, although this week is going to be tough because I have a board meeting until like 11, and tomorrow night's the gala, presidential gala dinner. So that's going to be late too, and I'm flying out at 6 a.m. on Friday.
Well, good luck sleeping on that flight is all I have to say because and
I'm going to say bye to you because I have to fly through Toronto.
Oh, okay. Well, wave as you go through. Listen, that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us. Next week's episode will be the last live episode of the season, but lots of great content coming up all summer long with our interviews, great interviews from Seattle with a whole host of very interesting people.
Yes.
Canadian ambassador from Morocco. We've got beautiful butter being created. That's all I'm buying now from the Jersey cows, like this beautiful golden butter.
Jersey,
we're going to talk to St. Bridget's.
The glow-in-the-dark butter, eh?
We got Chef Chuck Hughes rejoined us back and talking about his award-winning or finalist product. So we got just an onslaught of great content coming up. And again, next week, Colleen will be with us talking about what Canadians think about cashiers sitting down. But for now, I'm Michael LeBlanc, consumer growth consultant, media entrepreneur, keynote speaker, and you are?
I'm the food professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
Safe travels, Sylvain. Safe travels home. Safe travels to anybody who's traveling. And we'll be back and talk to you next week.
Take care.